Hello students, I am Manju Mam and today I'll be explaining you the topic respiration of lesson 1 life process. Before respiration you all must have already got the video of the topic nutrition and digestive system in human beings. So today I'll be explaining you what is respiration. Now respiration in a common language is just intake of oxygen and giving out of carbon dioxide. But in biological term, it is a complex process. Respiration is a biochemical oxidation of food in the presence of specific enzymes at optimum temperature in the mitochondria of the cell to release energy for various metabolic activity. Respiration is a catabolic process and there occurs exchange of gases, that is carbon dioxide and oxygen, between the body and the atmosphere. Now you should be having a clear concept that what is respiration and breathing. Breathing is just a physical process where there is no involvement of any enzyme. It is simple process of intaking oxygen and giving out carbon dioxide. Whereas respiration is a biochemical process and here number of enzymes are involved to release energy to do our day-to-day activity. This is the main difference between respiration and breathing. I suppose you people are having now, you must be clear about what is breathing and respiration. Now the next topic that I'll be explaining is type of respiration. Now in your junior classes you all must have already heard or you must have already learned that respiration is of two types: aerobic respiration and anaerobic respiration. So once again I repeat, there are two types of respiration: aerobic and anaerobic respiration. So to make the terms more clear to you, now I'll explain what is aerobic respiration. Aerobic respiration is taking in oxygen and oxidation of the food in the presence of oxygen. That is called aerobic respiration. And anaerobic respiration is the food is oxidized in the absence of oxygen, and that is called anaerobic respiration. So the definition of aerobic respiration is when cells or organs carrying out oxidation of food material utilizing molecular oxygen, then it is called aerobic respiration. And you can see in the page displayed on the screen, the reaction is written. Glucose, it is a 6-carbon compound. The formula of glucose, I am sure you all must be knowing, it is C6H12O6. So that is why we say, you will be seeing on the screen below glucose, I have written 6C, that it is a 6-carbon compound. Now this glucose is present in the cytoplasm of the cell, and the glucose is broken down into yet simple carbon compound that is called pyruvic acid, or you can say pyruvate, in the presence of number of enzymes. But in class 10th, you need not know the name of the enzymes and all. You only have to know the process that glucose in the cytoplasm is converted to pyruvic acid, which is a 3-carbon compound. We get 2 molecules of pyruvic acid. 6C is broken down into 3C, 2 molecules of pyruvic acid. and this process is called glycolysis. Now the pyruvic acid enters into the mitochondria. Here there is involvement of oxygen. So in the mitochondria, in the presence of oxygen, the pyruvic acid is completely oxidized into carbon dioxide, water, and energy is released in the form of ATP. What is ATP? I'll explain you later on. Now at present, in aerobic respiration, the equation goes such. Glucose in the cytoplasm by the process of glycolysis is broken down into two pyruvic acid molecules. Now the pyruvic acid in the mitochondria in the presence of oxygen, and the process is known as Krebs cycle, is completely oxidized into carbon dioxide, water, and 38 ATP molecule of energy is released. As you can see the equation displayed on the screen. Now I'll explain you about anaerobic respiration. Earlier itself I have told you that anaerobic respiration is a respiration that takes place in the absence of oxygen. So definition goes as when cells or organisms carry out oxidation of nutrients without using molecular oxygen. I repeat, without using molecular oxygen. Then it is called anaerobic respiration. For example, in yeast during fermentation. So here the equation is written: glucose in the presence of cytoplasm by the process of glycolysis is converted into two molecules of pyruvic acid. Till this step, aerobic and anaerobic respiration equation is same. The difference comes when oxygen is used or not used. So in anaerobic respiration, in yeast during fermentation, that is in the absence of oxygen. Now pyruvic acid is incompletely broken, it is not completely oxidized. So we get two molecules of ethanol, that is ethyl alcohol, 2 carbon dioxide plus 2 ATP. So we are getting here less quantity of energy. So again I'll repeat the equation of anaerobic respiration. Glucose in the cytoplasm by the process of glycolysis is converted to two molecules of pyruvic acid. So in yeast during fermentation, in the absence of oxygen, we are getting two molecules of ethanol, carbon dioxide, and 2 ATP molecules. Now this takes place in yeast in unicellular organism, and you all must have observed in the kitchen when your mother prepares dough for idli, dosha. She keeps the dough overnight, and in the morning the dough is risen. That is due to fermentation. And there are holes, you must have seen holes on the bread. That is also a process of anaerobic respiration, because it releases carbon dioxide and that produces holes in the dough, and you can see it in the bread slices as well. And anaerobic respiration sometimes even it occurs in human beings when we do rigorous exercise, when we are doing physical work, when we require a lot of energy. In that case our muscles also they undergo anaerobic respiration because they do not get that much of oxygen required to produce energy. So in that case, the muscle cells, in the presence of insufficient amount of oxygen, they produce lactic acid and energy. So anaerobic respiration in muscles. Anaerobic respiration in muscles. The equation goes: glucose in the cytoplasm by the process of glycolysis is converted into two molecules of pyruvic acid. Then in the muscle cells, in the lack of oxygen, it is converted to lactic acid plus energy. And this lactic acid gets accumulated in our muscle cells, and that is why when we do some exercise or physical work, we get tired because of the deposition of lactic acid. But when we take rest after some time, again the lactic acid is converted into pyruvic acid. So now I suppose you are having a clear concept that there are two types of respiration: aerobic respiration and anaerobic respiration. In aerobic respiration, we require oxygen. In anaerobic respiration, oxygen is not used for releasing energy. This is the main concept here. And in anaerobic respiration, we have seen two reactions. One in the yeast during fermentation, and the second is in the muscle cells when we are doing physical exercise. Now I'll let you know what is ATP. In aerobic respiration, we got 38 molecules of ATP. And in anaerobic respiration, we got 2 ATP molecules. Actually, this in class 9th, you all must have studied the cell organelle called mitochondria. And in that, you all must have learned that mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. In the mitochondria, this energy is stored, and the ATP is known as energy currency of the cell. The full formula of ATP is adenosine triphosphate. The full formula of ATP is adenosine triphosphate. So ATP is the energy currency for most cellular process. The energy released during the process of respiration is used to make an ATP molecule from ADP and inorganic phosphate. And on the screen you can see the reaction. ADP means adenosine diphosphate. It reacts with phosphate ion in the presence of energy, and we get ATP molecules. AT means triphosphate. So third bond of the phosphate, when it is broken, the energy is released to do a metabolic activity. So this is what is ATP. So I am sure what is ATP? ATP is the energy currency for most of the cellular process. And where it is stored? It is stored in the mitochondria. And that is why we call mitochondria as powerhouse of the cell. Now, since I have made you clear that there are two types of respiration, aerobic respiration and anaerobic respiration. So now we should know what is the difference between aerobic respiration and anaerobic respiration. So on the screen you can see the first point, the very first point I told, that only the first point it is written, that aerobic respiration takes place in the presence of oxygen and anaerobic respiration takes place in the absence of oxygen. Then in the reaction you can see of aerobic respiration, the end product is carbon dioxide and water, both inorganic molecules. Whereas in anaerobic respiration, the end product is organic compound as well as inorganic. Because in the yeast, it is ethanol, and in the muscle cells, we are getting lactic acid. And in yeast, with the ethanol, we also get carbon dioxide. Now, the third difference between aerobic and anaerobic respiration, you can see in the reaction that in aerobic respiration, there are 38 ATP molecules is released. So the third difference between aerobic and anaerobic respiration is large amount of energy is released in aerobic respiration, that is 38 ATP molecules. And in anaerobic respiration, less amount of energy is released. The reason is the food or the nutrient is not completely oxidized in the presence or in the lack of oxygen. Now the fourth difference is, you can see in the reaction itself, in anaerobic respiration, two organelles are involved, cytoplasm and mitochondria. Whereas in anaerobic respiration, only one organelle is involved, that is cytoplasm. So till here, I suppose you people must be getting my point, what till now I have been explaining you. So I have explained you about respiration, type of respiration, the reaction of the respiration aerobic and two reactions of anaerobic respiration. Then I have explained you about what is ATP and how energy is released. Then I explained you about aerobic and difference between aerobic and anaerobic respiration. Now in the beginning itself, I had told you that respiration and breathing, they are two different processes. Breathing is a physical phenomenon. And in breathing, different organisms, they have different organs. Like human beings, terrestrial organisms, we have lungs. The aquatic animals, they have fins, book lungs for respiration. Though the organs may be different, the characteristic features of all the respiratory organ is the same, because the main purpose of the respiratory organ is to take maximum amount of oxygen from the environment and release carbon dioxide. So I'll be telling you the common characteristic feature of all the respiratory organs. And in the examination also, a direct question is asked of 2 marks. Write the characteristic features of all the respiratory organs. So the characteristic feature of all the respiratory organs, the first point is, all the organs have a structure that increases the surface area. All the respiratory organs, they have such type of structure that they increases the surface area. Second point, to facilitate quick exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide, their surface is very fine and delicate. Their surface is very fine and delicate. The third point is that they are richly supplied by blood vessels. The third point is that the respiratory organs are richly supplied. They are richly supplied by blood capillaries, so that quick diffusion of the gases takes place. And the fourth point is, there is a mechanism of moving the air in and out of this area where oxygen can be absorbed. So these are the 4 characteristic features of respiratory organs. Now the next topic is how exchange of gases takes place in plants. Now you all must be thinking that plants, they do not have any different organs like animals. So how they are performing their activities? So the gaseous exchange in plants takes place through stomata. You all must have already studied in class 9th that the plants in the leaves, on the epidermal surface of the leaves, on the outer surface of the stem, there are tiny pores which is known as stoma, and they are guarded by 2 bean-shaped structure called guard cell. So the exchange of gases in plants by the process of diffusion occurs through stomata. Now you all must be confused whether the plants release oxygen or carbon dioxide. So to make this point clear to you all, first thing I would like to say that during daytime, the plants, they perform photosynthesis and they use oxygen from the atmosphere. They use carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and release oxygen in the atmosphere. During night time, it is not that during daytime they are releasing oxygen and they are not releasing carbon dioxide. But the carbon dioxide that is present in the atmosphere or that they release, they consume it in the process of photosynthesis. So the byproduct of photosynthesis is oxygen that they release into the atmosphere through diffusion from the stomata. But during night time, since there is no sunlight, so they take in oxygen and give out carbon dioxide. So in plants, there is no special means of transport of gases. The gases move entirely by diffusion. In the plants, the gaseous exchange takes place by diffusion. And since the plants are stationary and they do not require a lot of energy, so the process of respiration is slow in plants. Now, it must be clear to you all that the plants during daytime or during night time, the respiration process is on. Only the thing is that during daytime, photosynthesis is more dominant. So that is why whatever carbon dioxide they are releasing, they consume it and they produce oxygen. But during night time, they use oxygen and they release carbon dioxide. In the same way, now I'll explain you about the exchange of gases in aquatic and terrestrial organism. Now you all must be knowing aquatic animals means the animals that live in water. They are known as aquatic organism. Now these aquatic organisms, they use oxygen that is dissolved in the water. So the aquatic organisms have different organs for taking in oxygen from the dissolved water. For example, fishes, they have gills and the gills are richly supplied by blood vessels. So through the water they inhale, and from the water the oxygen is absorbed by the blood capillaries that is surrounding the gills, and they release carbon dioxide to the atmosphere in the water. Whereas in terrestrial organism, we are taking oxygen from the atmosphere itself. Now you all must have seen that in an aquarium, the fishes keep on opening the mouth very frequently, because the reason behind this is that the oxygen dissolved in water is in limited amount, that is H2O, 2:1 ratio. So they have to keep on taking quickly more and more water to get oxygen. Whereas the terrestrial organisms, in the atmosphere, there is enough oxygen. So that is why the aquatic organisms, they have to breathe faster to get more dissolved oxygen than the terrestrial organisms like mammals. And the normal rate of respiration, actually the process of respiration is an involuntary process. It is an involuntary process, but it is controlled by the respiratory center of the brain. In a normal adult, a man breathes 15 to 18 times per minute. But during vigorous physical exercises, the breathing rate increases. It can go up to 20 to 25 times per minute. So now, is it clear, students, how the gaseous exchange takes place in plant and how the gaseous exchange takes place in aquatic and terrestrial organisms. And why aquatic organisms have to breathe more faster than the terrestrial organism? Now, I'll be explaining you about the different parts of the human respiratory system. You can see on the screen the diagram of the human respiratory system. Just before explaining you, I will explain you the parts you can see on the screen. Nose, nasal passage. Then you can see the pharynx, larynx, trachea. Trachea is again divided into two branches called bronchi. And the bronchi are further being bifurcated into thin tubes known as bronchioles, which finally end up in alveolar sac, balloon-like structure called alveoli. In the diagram, you can see the alveolar sac, the bronchioles, and in the diagram, you can see that in the trachea, there are rings of cartilage. And the lungs are protected by double membrane that is known as pleura, and our lungs is present in the thoracic cavity. You can see in the diagram the diaphragm, which is separating the respiratory, our thoracic system from the abdomen. Now, how does this functions? The respiratory system, you can see here, the air we inhale enters into the nose, then it goes into a nasal passage. In a nasal passage, there are fine hairs and mucus lining. It is always advisable to breathe through nose because the air gets filters. The air is filtered in the nose by the fine hairs that are present in the nasal passage and the mucus. So from here, the filtered air enters into the pharynx. Now, pharynx is a common passage both for food as well as for gas. In the digestive system, you must have seen how the pharynx is having a passage known as glottis, which is protected by epiglottis. So when we swallow the food, the glottis is covered by epiglottis so that the food particles do not enter into a windpipe, that is trachea. Now, from the pharynx, the air enters into the larynx. This is also known as voice box. There are two vocal cords which vibrates and sound is produced. Now the air passes through the trachea. In the screen you can see in the trachea there are rings of cartilage. Now why this ring of cartilage is present? Because when there is less air, the trachea does not collapse. Even this question is asked, why does the trachea does not collapse when there is less air? So you all can say the trachea does not collapse because the trachea is supported by C-shaped rings of cartilage. Now you can see the trachea gets divided into two branches, and that is known as bronchi. It goes into the right and the left lungs. The bronchi then further bifurcates into fine branches known as bronchioles, which ends into the alveolar sac, or you can see alveoli. The lung, you can see the alveoli. In this figure, you can see the enlarged structure of alveoli, the balloon-like structure, which is richly supplied by blood vessels. Here, the main exchange of gases takes place. So, our lungs is very beautifully designed so that we can take maximum amount of air. The lungs, the trachea is divided into two bronchi, which further bifurcates into bronchioles, and then which ends into numerous millions of alveoli, which is richly supplied by blood vessels, where exchange of gases takes place. So exchange of gases, where does it takes place? It takes place in the alveoli in the lungs. And this also helps to increase the surface area. It helps to increase the surface area. Now you can see, again I repeat, the different parts of the respiratory system: nose, nasal passage, pharynx, larynx, trachea, bronchi, bronchioles, alveolar sac. The lung is protected by double membrane that is known as pleura, and the lung which is present in a thoracic cavity is separated by the from the abdominal cavity with the help of diaphragm. Now I am sure you all must have understood the process of the structure of human respiratory system. Now when we exhale or inhale air, never our lungs is without air. How much ever pressure we apply and we exhale air, some little amount of air is always left in the lung, and that is what is known as residual volume. So this residual volume is very important, as there is sufficient time for oxygen to be absorbed and for the carbon dioxide to be released. So often in the examination, it is asked, what is residual volume, or what is the importance of residual volume? So I am sure you will be able to write that always some air is left in the lungs, even after forced exhalation. And that left amount of air is called residual gas, which helps in the continuity of the process of absorption of oxygen and releasing of carbon dioxide. Now, as you can see in the picture here on the screen, the alveoli is surrounded by blood capillaries, and in the blood capillaries, the blood is there, which contains a respiratory pigment called hemoglobin. The property of hemoglobin is that it has great affinity for oxygen. So it absorbs oxygen, and this hemoglobin is present in the red blood corpuscles, and through the blood it is transported to the different part of the body. And the carbon dioxide that has been used, it is more soluble in water than oxygen is, and is mostly transported in the dissolved form of our blood. So this is how our respiratory system functions. And now, since I have already explained what is respiration, type of respiration, structure of human respiratory system, now we come to the last topic in respiration, that is mechanism of breathing in human beings. The process of breathing is involuntary, but the rate is under the control of the respiratory system or respiratory center of the brain. Now the mechanism of breathing involves two steps, that is inhalation and exhalation. Inhalation is the process when we breathe in the air, and exhalation is when we give out the air, when we exhale the air outside. So in inhalation, when we breathe in the air, we lift our ribs and flatten or contract our diaphragm. This makes the thoracic cavity, that is chest, move upward and outward, thereby increasing the volume inside the thoracic cavity, that is the chest cavity. This results in increasing the volume and decreasing the air pressure in the lungs. As a result, air from outside rushes into the lungs, whereas in exhalation, the thoracic cavity returns to its normal size due to the relaxing of diaphragm and ribs. Due to this, the surface area of the lungs decreases and the air pressure inside the lungs increases. And so the air, that is carbon dioxide, is produced out through the trachea and nostril. This is the mechanism of breathing in human beings, that is inhalation and exhalation. Now, on the topic of explanation, I have prepared some questions. That you have to write it down in your biology copy. You have to make the notes of the prepared topic by the teachers, that is nutrition, digestive system in human beings, and the third topic that I am explaining today is respiration. After preparing the notes in the same copy, you have to do the assignment that we give during our lecture, so that when the school reopens, we'll check your copies. So here are some of the questions that you have to write it down in your biology copy. First, what is respiration? What are the different pathways in which glucose is oxidized to provide energy in various organisms? This is the second question. And in this you have to write the three equations, aerobic and anaerobic. Then the third question is, how is oxygen and carbon dioxide transported in human beings? The fourth question you have to write is, how are the lungs designed in human beings to maximize the area for exchange of gases? Fifth question is, why the rate of breathing is more in aquatic organism than terrestrial organism? All the explanation is there in the video. If you listen carefully, you will get all the answers. Then the sixth question is, why it is advised to breathe through nose and not from mouth? Seventh question, why the air passage, that is trachea, do not collapse even when there is less air? Next question is, what is residual volume? Question 9 is, what are the difference between aerobic and anaerobic respiration? Now the next question is, draw a neat and labeled diagram of respiratory system of human beings. Next, explain the mechanism of breathing in human beings. And the last question is, what are the characteristic features of all respiratory organs? I hope my students must have understood the explanation of respiration, its type, structure and mechanism of breathing. Now you have to complete all this work in your classwork copy. Now before I end my lecture, I would like to give two advice due to COVID-19. that we are undergoing hard times. So be safe, have hygienic habits, keep washing your hands, keep your mouth covered whenever you are going outside. Avoid going out of your home. Be safe, be healthy, be happy, be away from any type of anxiety, and regularly keep in touch with the Google School site and keep completing your work. Thank you so much. Now the next time when I'll come, I'll explain the topic transportation in human beings. Thank you. Have a good day.